Yeah, all
Yeah,
right.
hey,
Okay,
Ravi.
great. Good to see all of you. And just to our audience, hello and welcome, everyone. And I just want to say what a fantastic, yet also simultaneously triggering film. All the feels, Debbie. My name is Ravi Chandra, and I'm a psychiatrist and writer here in San Francisco. I write for Psychology Today, and you can find my long-form essays written from my corner of the intersection of Black and Asian lives at East Wind Zine under Memoirs of a Superfan. I've known Debbie for over 15 years. We met when she screened a short film at the Asian American Film Festival, now called CamFest, and I'd been writing about film since about that time. We also both happen to be alums of Brown University. I just wanted to thank everyone involved in making this event possible. Debbie Lum and her creative team, including Tiffany Shan and Jinyu Kim, and our sponsor, the Brown Club of Greater San Francisco. And of course, thanks to the panelists whom I will introduce in just a moment. I just first wanted all of us, I think there are many people gathered here live as well. I just wanted us all to take a moment to imagine that we are all actually in the same space, face to face, shoulder to shoulder, and heart to heart. Now, I'd like us all to bring to mind someone who really valued us and made us feel safe, comfortable, and cared for. It could be a teacher, a parent, a mentor, or a friend. And let's just give them a silent thanks and extend that thanks to all the people who have influenced us and influenced them for the better. And this has been a difficult few years for adults and youth. Our needs for social and racial justice, our needs for physical, mental, and social wellness have all been exposed. Any thinking and feeling person has experienced moral distress. Young people, especially those in developing countries, are more optimistic than adults, but they're facing a rapidly changing and complex world. Suicidality, anxiety, depression, and loneliness have dramatically increased across the population, but especially in American youth in the last decade, and most especially in those youth who are marginalized and vulnerable in the greater society. Some of this has been tagged to social media and smartphones, which have become a dramatic influence on developing minds and relationships, apart from parents and teachers and classmates, which we've seen already. This is part of the context in which this wonderful film appears. I loved Try Harder for its warmth, subtlety, and focus on young people's journeys. It spotlights many issues without explicitly telling us what to think. However, we live in unsubtle times which demand us to think and feel and understand ourselves and our shared journeys, and also express and relate on deeper levels, which is what I hope this film can help us do in this conversation. And let me introduce our panelists now. Debbie Lum is an award-winning filmmaker whose projects give voice to the Asian American experience and other unsung stories. Her most recent film, which we just watched, Try Harder, premiered at the 2021 Sundance Film Festival in the U.S. documentary competition. So congratulations, Debbie. Denise Pope, Ph.D., is a senior lecturer at the Stanford University Graduate School of Education, where she specializes in student engagement, curriculum studies, qualitative research methods, and service learning. She is co-founder of Challenge Success, a school reform nonprofit that partners with schools and families to embrace a broad definition of success and implement research-based strategies that promote student well-being and engagement with learning. She also co-hosts the Stanford University Sirius XM radio show called Schools In. Dr. Pope lectures nationally on parenting techniques and pedagogical strategies to increase student health, engagement, learning, and integrity. And finally, starring as herself, Rachael Schmidt. Rachael is, of course, a graduate of Lowell and a recent graduate of Brown University. Congratulations, where she studied biology with a focus on physiology and biotechnology. Currently, she's back in the city conducting neuroscience research at UCSF and looking to apply to medical school in the summer of next year. Let me first turn to you, Debbie. How did this film come to be?
Thank you, Ravi. And thank you so much, Ravi, to you as well for making this entire thing happen. Yeah, what a lovely way to start. And I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. As well with Denise. What an honor to be here with you. And Rachel, we love you, Rachel. And I can't wait to hear your perspective on Brown, having just graduated. So congratulations. And to your question, how it began. So I was, I've always made documentaries about the Asian American experience. And when I started making the film, my oldest daughter was just entering pre-K, and I found myself suddenly immersed in this world of, stress and competition, and primarily about whether my 4-year-old would one day get into college, which for many of the people in the room, as a Brown alum, it was not something that I particularly stressed out about when I was in high school. I always say, like, I would never have gotten into Brown if I were a high school student today, like Rachel did. I never would have gotten in. And I had no idea that it was such a, how much high school had changed. But I actually started out looking at it from a parent's perspective, because here I was with my 4-year-old trying to get into preschool in the Bay Area and finding out how stressful that is. I started talking to other moms and principals and looking at it through the stereotype of tiger parenting. And we had heard about Lowell High School. I'm not from San Francisco. I'm a transplant. But of course, the minute you land here, it's iconic and everybody knows about it. And we thought Lowell was going to be just one chapter in the story. But the minute we met the students like Rachel and Alvin and Mr. Shapiro, we fell in love with the kids, and we realized that it was their story that really needed to be foregrounded. Because, all of us, probably a lot of us in this room are parents, or, maybe soon to be parents. And we've read about the college stress and the admissions and everything. And we always, you talk about the pressure and everything, but we rarely see it from the student's point of view. And that was really what once I heard their voices and heard their stories, and that's basically what I wanted to do, was to tell their story.
Thank you so much. It was so well done. Really brought me into your lives. So I'll turn to Rachel. What was it like to star in your first feature film, and now see your life as it was 4 years ago? And I'm so sorry that COVID has robbed you of physical red carpet fame.
Thank you. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. It's been so surreal to see myself in the film and to see what my peers and my friends were going through at such a vulnerable time in our lives. And I think especially with the environment of Lowell, so much of what we go through, how stressed out we are, how much we take on, is justified in our own heads as, oh, we're doing this to get to our ultimate goal of whatever college we're seeking to go to. And sometimes we even work against ourselves and tell ourselves that it's not enough. So to be a slightly more mature adult now and to see what I was going through then, I have a newfound appreciation for everything that I went through and my friends, everyone of my classmates were going through on a daily basis, how much work we put on ourselves and how ambitious we were. So it's been a really strange, a really wonderful experience, but as you also said, it's a little triggering. I got very nervous again. I was brought back into that environment.
Oh my goodness. it was hard enough watching everything and remembering my own journey as well. Denise, what are your thoughts after watching the film, and how does it square with what you do at Challenge Success?
And I want to put a little note out there that I too have a Brown connection, that I am a mom of a Brown alum from 2018. So I feel like I'm a part of the family here, even though I'm one removed. And I have fond memories of visiting Providence. It was pre-COVID, obviously. So here's the story. In 1996, when I was pregnant with said Brown alum, I was writing my dissertation, and I shadowed 5 students in a very competitive high school similar to Lowell in the Bay Area, but that one that did not have as many Asian students. One of the 5 students that I shadowed for the year was Asian. And I think if you go back and read her chapter in my book, the book's called Doing School, because that's what the kids decided, the 5 kids I was shadowing decided to call it, because that's sort of what you do. You do school, you play the game. And there's a line that I think Ian says in the movie that literally is also in my book, which is you have to get the grades, to get the test scores, to get into college, to get the high paying job, to get to happiness. And so I wasn't surprised when I saw the film. I had been seeing this since the late 90s. What was really powerful for me is that I've been working to change this culture since the late 90s, and that it feels like we have so far to go, and it feels like certain things have gotten worse, not better, since the late 90s. And so, the mental health issues that we see connected to stress and achievement pressure and sleep deprivation. There's a scene, Rachel, we were getting up in the middle of the night and going to school, it seemed like, and you just see how exhausted your eyes are, and you see all the kids exhausted and stressed, this real lack of balance. I think Sophia was in a million different clubs and also working at the ice cream store. So the competition between kids, where it really should be collaboration and fostering a sense of unity, and we're all in this together, and it was much more sort of competition. And since then, since I wrote the book about 5 kids, Challenge Success has continued to do research throughout the years. We have lots and lots of surveys, and one, I just want to share just a couple of bullet points to show that even during COVID, the academic pressure was so high. So we surveyed over 10,000 parents of kids at high achieving schools, public, private, all over the US. This is not just a San Francisco thing. This is not just a Lowell High School thing. This is not just an Asian thing, although we do see certain characteristics of this that tend to align more with the Asian culture, which we can talk about. But 62% of parents said, I expect excellence in school from my children. 63% said, I set very high academic standards. And when you ask the kids, we had 70,000 kids in the survey, my parents want me to be the best at everything. Almost half of them in this survey said, my parents want me to be the best at everything, in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of a summer of race reckoning and climate change and politics and everything like that. So I wasn't surprised by what I saw in the movie. I felt like it really portrayed very realistically. This is not hyperbole. I think using real kids in a real school like that shows that. And what we do at Challenge Success is we're challenging that really narrow notion of success. We're saying there are multiple paths to success, that it's not just about grades and test scores and where you go to college. And we have a lot of research that bears that out. And we spend a lot of time working with parents and students and overall schools and school policies to really help make that change.
Well, thank you. And maybe this is a question then. How do you define success at the high school level? And maybe others could also chime in about that question.
Yeah, I mean, I'll start, but I'm really curious how, Debbie, after the work that you've done, and Rachel, now that you can look back. I mean, so our mission at Challenge Success is, at bottom line, there has to be well-being. If you're too exhausted or anxious or depressed to get out of bed in the morning, there's no way you're going to enjoy school, learn in school, be prepared for anything, right? So bottom line is well-being, and right next to well-being is engagement. And engagement with learning is where you are excited to learn, you are enjoying what you learn, you are cognitively engaged, you're behaviorally engaged, you're doing the work, and what we say, you're affectively engaged. It's the ABCs of engagement. So for us, how we define success is really being healthy physically and mentally, and being engaged in whatever that is. It doesn't have to be academics, but being engaged in your life and thriving. So let's see what Debbie and Rachel have to say.
Rachel, do you want to go first? You want me to go first?
Yeah, maybe you can go first.
Okay, I'll jump in. I mean, I would love to just sort of say that the students that we met at Lowell High School, you know, in our film, you see the competitive side to it. But you know, one of the big things that was important for me was to show the exuberance and the personalities of all the kids there. And actually, that was something that was really sort of, I wouldn't say it was surprising, although it was counter to the stereotype that maybe I went into filming with. You know, when you talk about a school like Lowell High School, mostly because I'd heard from so many parents that said, I will never send my kid to this high school because it's so competitive. And, you know, I always felt like there was this undercurrent of, and it's so Asian, you know, there's so many Asian kids and they're so competitive against each other. And what I found was that the kids, you know, like, and what I found about our story was that these are kids that are, they're teenagers, like teenagers everywhere. And they have their joys and they have their upsets, and they have way too much pressure from their parents. And really, when you look at, you know, what I saw as what was kind of universal about it, it was young teenagers, 17 and 18-year-olds, becoming separate from their parents and trying to figure out who they were through this process of going into college and applying to college. And that's like such a universal thing that we all have to go through. And when you know, in a way, it's like the real eye-opening thing that I got out of it as a filmmaker was sort of ancillary to the story itself, which is that I watched young people really grow up in a year that I was there. And I didn't, you know, I hadn't been to high school and thought about high school that intensely. And, you know, since Brown, like 25 years ago or a lifetime ago. And I didn't, you know, and my kids, I'm an older mom, so my kids aren't going through it. So to see that objectively from the outside, to watch a kid go through that, like to watch Rachael grow up in the course of a year that we filmed her, was really a powerful thing to see. And that a lot of this, you know, what the success that students were yearning for was really that sort of having their own sense of themselves as their own, you know, individual beings, whatever the outcome was of their college results. And actually, oftentimes it was like their parents who had a harder time with the results than they did. Even though you do see, you know, utter disappointment, but you see, you know, Sophia, who we were worried that she was going to, you know, Sophia, the ice cream scooper, bowling ball, you know, not fearless of bowling balls coming at her face. She had no backup school in her list of colleges. And we really were like, oh my God, I hope she gets into a single college. And she was, you know, sometimes she comes along to our Q&As, and she basically says that she realized that she would have been happy at any college that she went to. Just like what Shay said, was that, you know, she could have made a great, and which is what she did. She really loved her experience at UCLA. So, I mean, it's fundamentally the same as Denise. And it's really more of a kind of looking at it from the parents' perspective, because I think we're so much, you know, this is why I had started out making a film called My Tiger Mom, because I feel like we have a lot of, you know, a lot of the pressure that is on kids today is really top down. Yeah, but like Alvin, one of our kids said, well, he's an adult now, but when he watched it, he said, I wish I could have just given that high school kid a big hug and tell him it's going to be okay. Rachel, do you want to add something?
I think my answer is pretty much similar to both of yours. I would say, a lot of people, and especially when we were at Lowell, we had a very different idea of success being like what college we got into. But I think now that I'm away from all of that, I think success in high school should be related to developing tools for life, whether that be problem solving with your education, like what classes you're in, or developing skills that are very important in life, like managing your mental health and prioritizing that. And like what Debbie said, developing the tools and skills to decide who you are and figure out who you're supposed to be. I think you were speaking to this a little bit. There's that stereotype of what a Lowell student is or who they are, and that we're all just carbon copies of each other. And really at Lowell, the most diverse group of people with such strong personalities that I can remember to this day, they came from Lowell. So, yeah.
Thank you. Well, sense of self, tools for life and well-being. If you all could manage to accomplish that across the country, I would be happily out of a job as a psychiatrist. So thank you for advocating for these things. So next, another question for all of you. We see one significant aspect of Lowell students' lives that try harder, as we've discussed, the drive for college admissions, propelled by their parents and their own desires. And I think it's Alvin who says he's fighting a war on two fronts, at home and in school. And there's this painful sense of binary, win or lose, success or failure, antagonistic competition, and getting ahead of each other, all amidst all this exuberance and relating that they're doing. And this is all at 17 or 18 years of age. From my perspective, this pressure cooker really feels crazy making to me. And this is all so much worse, I think, than when I applied to college. But the social comparison and insecurity around forming one's identity and getting it right are so painfully familiar. And as I said, I'm sure many of us were triggered by all of that. And I think Ian actually says this all leaves out happiness. So what costs did you see this taking on the student body that you followed or that you were in?
Very well said, Ravi. I think that, one of the things that I found really interesting about the Lowell students is that, hold on a minute here. I'm having some tech issues. I hope I'm not doing something weird here. Okay. Does my screen look very strange?
No.
Okay. One of the things I found both kind of, it's a catch-22 because on the one hand, as an Asian American growing up, in the US, it's something I totally identified with in terms of the Lowell sort of spirit mentality. They have a saying at Lowell, which is the oldest public high school west of the Mississippi. It was established in 1856. And they have this joke, the students, they say it's Lowell High School where your best has not been good enough since 1856. Mm-hmm. And I have to say, it's kind of like one of those things that I feel like as an Asian American, it's just something that is sort of part of our identity in a way, that you kind of wear on your sleeve a little bit. You just, you're always trying harder, like the title. And it's complicated because I think we could, it's on the one hand, it's sort of this motivator that gets us to do things, sometimes very creative, amazing things in life, you know, but at the same time, there isn't that, you know, we all need more of a sense of balance and of when you know, when we can feel appreciation for what we do have. And that's just a hard thing to do in general. It's not, I don't think Lowell high school students or any, you know, parents who have college-age kids, college-bound kids are, you know, are suffering from any more than all of us are in the world. But it is really, it's really hard to not get caught up in the whole process. And one of the things that, you know, I discovered in the making of the film, there's a little tiny, there is, you see this little excerpt of a YouTube video that comes from Stanford that sort of basically tells you about the Stanford dream. And I was really surprised when I saw that, you know, it had 1 million hits on YouTube. And it was interesting because you know, it wasn't like it was put out there by students, you know, it really is an official marketing tool from a school like Stanford. And you know, we are really in this world where everything is over marketed, where, you know, it is really this like, it's the brand name and nothing less, you know. And I mean, it's like if you went to Brown, as we all did in this forum, you remember the time when, you know, Brown is just like one of the funny schools of the Ivy League, where it's like we go in and out of favor, and, you know, where it's like you can't really take the rankings that as seriously, I think, and as one shouldn't, because it's really, you know, it's just such a narrow point of view. So, yeah.
Okay, so either of you, Denise or Rachel, want to chime in on the costs of this college admissions frenzy?
I'll go, and then Rachel, you can bring up the rear here. You know, another thing that we see, so we see a huge amount of kids who are sleep deprived. An average teenager needs 8 to 10 hours of sleep every single night. That is what they need. And in our survey, again, 100,000 kids, our average is about 6.8, and we have many, many kids sleeping 4 or 5 hours a night. They should not be behind the wheel of a car. There is a correlation between sleep deprivation and depression, between sleep deprivation and anxiety, and other mental health issues. So one real cost of this sort of overschedule, frenzy, take every AP class known to man to get the GPA up. I think Shay said, I spend 4 hours a day on physics, and then I go to bed at 3 a.m., you know, and that you cannot sustain that and still think that you're going to come out intact physically and mentally. So that is a huge, huge toll. The stress, the burnout, etc. We also see huge amounts of cheating. And, you know, Debbie, I don't know how much you saw this when you were filming or how honest the kids would be, but I saw it when I was shadowing kids, because at some point they couldn't keep up the disguise. They had to cheat in front of me because I was there, and they had to cheat. We see cheating at about 80% in our survey. So not only is there a mental health and a physical health problem with this sort of crazy race to college admissions, but they're not actually learning the material in depth. A lot of times they're just sort of cramming it in, spitting it out. They're cheating their way through. Not everyone. I was actually happy to see in the film some kids who were really kind of into doing this. I mean, Alvin with his science project. I mean, I don't think Alvin was just doing that for his resume. I think he was really interested in it. So that gave me some hope. But there was that. And then the other really big loss is all these kids who said, well, I'm not good enough, or I didn't get in, so I'm a nobody, or my life is over. When, the teacher was doing that simulation of picture yourself not getting into any of these schools, there are some people who carry that with them for a really long time. And there are so many amazing colleges and universities and other post-secondary options for kids. And they're just so limited in what they're seeing and doing that they're missing out on amazing opportunities like Oxford, like where Ian went. So that's a real loss too. Rachel, what do you think?
Yeah, I completely agree with both of your answers. In terms of one of the things you can lose from this mentality towards school and college admissions is definitely the sense of self. I think that we've kind of touched on in our answers before. I mean, I think something that ironically I learned from AP Psych that really stuck with me is the concept of like intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. And I wonder why that hit so close to home when I learned it. I think I know now why. The idea that if we start placing extrinsic motivations like grades are, oh, this is for my college application, my resume, on the things that we actually enjoy doing, our intrinsic motivators, or even just anything that we feel will benefit us and get us toward that ultimate goal. We don't really, things that we enjoy doing, we don't enjoy doing them anymore, and we don't really know what kinds of things we like, what we don't like. So I think that is something that a lot of my friends and I, when we were going through this experience at Lowell, we really felt like this was happening to us. Like, we don't really know what to do with ourselves outside of our extracurriculars and when we're not studying. But at the same time, I do think a positive, I mean, it's hard to find a positive from all of this, but I will say that if I hadn't had some driving force behind me and helping me see what options I had for college, I probably would not have thought much about it at all, or not really realized my full potential, if that makes any sense. Like, my mom appears in the film, obviously, and she's very much so a motivating force behind a lot of what I did in high school. But honestly, if it hadn't been for her seeing things in me that I was not able to see in myself, I don't know if I'd be doing any of what I'm doing today. So in that sense, that drive to succeed, with success being like where you go after high school, I think, being able to find out things about yourself that you wouldn't have known otherwise can be a positive from all of it.
Yeah, I remember.
Sorry. Sorry. Go ahead, Debbie. Yeah.
Oh no, sorry, I'm interrupting. But you said just exactly that when you were a 17-year-old high school student, Rachel, and which I always felt was so farsighted at the time. And I think that's something that you do have to remember about a school like Lowell High School, which is a public institution in which, nearly 50% of the students qualify for free and reduced lunch, are coming from low income households. And, yes, there's a lot of pressure to excel and to achieve. And really the issue is overachieving, I think. Mm-hmm. Is what, what's really one of the big problems is, because, being pushed to maybe stretch yourself in learning is something that I think maybe 15 years ago at Lowell High School was a more balanced thing. It wasn't like you had to stretch yourself in every aspect, but maybe you could find your way and find the thing that really mattered to you as a student. One of the things that Challenge Success, does that I think is really wonderful is this whole idea of right college fit and really trying to help students understand what is the right fit. Because, it is hard to know that as a young, 15, 16, 17-year-old thinking about college. But the adults in the room can help steer students towards an understanding of what is a good fit instead of what is the college that I should go to, which is where I think most people land nowadays. When you talk to college counselors and they say, oh, I talked to a college counselor and I said, doesn't anyone ask you what is the right school for me or for my daughter or my son? And they just rolled their eyes at me. That is not what they get from the parents. It's really about, and actually, Rachel, your mom was very interested in ranking. I mean, that was sort of why she chose Lowell. What I found so interesting about your relationship with her is that she both pushed you, and she also, she had very high expectations, and she also had she was there to tell you that any of your outcomes she would have been proud of. And I think that's something that doesn't always happen with parents and their kids. Sometimes, in terms of not telling the truth, you mentioned cheating. We really did not. I know that this has come up at Lowell High School and every high school, really. The Lowell paper that Rachel wrote for did a cover story on it. But at the same time, I never met those kids. I met kids that were the complete opposite of that. Mr. Shapiro, the physics teacher, he had the kids grade their own tests. And they, I watched them in agony doing it, and not wanting, just basically being the complete opposite of that. Never, it would never cross their mind to cheat. It was sort of like the indignity of that. They wouldn't do that, but where I did hear a lot from students were, which really surprised me, where kids didn't tell their parents where they got into college. Mm-hmm. Actually, kids who got into, a top ranking UC and said, I just told them I didn't get in because I don't want that pressure and I want to choose my own way of doing things. And I think that's kind of the thing that you think about as a parent. It's like you want to maintain the intimacy with your kid that you had when they were 3 or 4 or 6 through 16, and it's a really hard thing to do if there's too much pressure.
Yeah, thank you. And Rachel, to go back to what you were saying about your mom, who is a co-star of the film for sure, and a big shout out to her. I was also raised by a single mom, so I really appreciate that and totally identify with those aspects of your journey as well. But also, I wanted to turn back to you, Rachel. This film doesn't overtly discuss mental health issues, and clearly you're a very successful and thoughtful young person. But what did you find strengthened and challenged your own journeys of wellness and relatedness in high school?
Yeah, honestly, one of the biggest challenges for my own personal mental health was, unfortunately, some of the very competitive aspects of Lowell's environment, because you can kind of see in the film with the way we speak about what we're going through and how many things we have to do. Definitely just having conversations with my classmates back then, how much stress you felt, how many AP classes you were taking, or how many tests you had that week. They were all kind of badges of honor that we wore with pride. It's actually like a meme where people have competitions over how little sleep they had that past night. So it's really difficult when you're in that environment on a day-to-day basis to prioritize your own mental health when you have all of these external forces at hand trying to say, well, maybe you should be sleeping less and studying more, for example. But actually, one of the biggest strengths for my mental health, and it goes back to how wonderful the people at Lowell are, were my friends that I had. I was very fortunate. I know not everyone, in fact, many people who are in high school aren't as lucky, but I had quite a large supportive network of friends with common interests that were beyond the classroom. So things that we could relate to each other about that weren't class related, that were just for us to talk and to relax and to have fun with. And so I think that helped me when I was in high school to develop the very important skill set of having things for yourself and to not have everything you do be focused on work or on success, and developing your career, whether that be academic or, professional, so on and so forth. But it is something that I wish a lot more of people in high school had. I definitely remember a few conversations with my classmates where, they may not have felt like they had that supportive network. So I wish that was something that was a little more widespread, both at Lowell and with high school students as a whole.
Yeah, it's so great to hear that you had a great set of peer relationships. Are you still in touch with your friends at Lowell?
Yes, all the time.
Oh, great. Right.
Yeah, we hang out very regularly. Yeah, I'm so thankful I had the
Wonderful.
opportunity to meet them.
Okay, and you also surfaced the issue of racism and how you were perceived and treated at times. I'll say that when I got into Brown, one of my white classmates said to me out of his own disappointment that it was because I was South Asian American. It didn't bother me at the time because I knew he was just disappointed, and he did later apologize, but I don't think I ever spoke to anyone at time about the racist assumptions that were underneath that. Did you get support for your identity journey at Lowell? And what better support could there be for other students who face what I call challenging identity experiences, particularly where race and ethnicity are concerned?
Yeah, it's difficult to be in an environment like that where you're proud of your own accomplishments, but peers may feel that you didn't deserve any of what you've worked really hard for. And I really felt like I was going into college like at a disadvantage. I was having imposter syndrome before I even hit the door. So it really makes college life challenging when you have that mindset of I don't belong here. I do wish I had more of a supportive network of people that were like me that I could have talked to about issues like that. I know back when I was at Lowell, the Black student population was like around 2%, which is very, very small. And the mixed race population was like less than 1%. So really, I didn't see many people in the classroom that looked like me or had the same experiences as me on a cultural level. So that was kind of difficult and something I wish I had had a little bit more experience with. I think it would have made a world of difference.
Yes, it does. It's hard to be the one or the only. And did you explicitly talk about racism at Lowell in classes or with peers?
I think towards the end of my Lowell career, that was something we were having a lot more conversations about. I remember in 2016, I think was the year we had the Black student walkout, where Black students from Lowell were, upset with all the microaggressions, kind of like the ones I faced, and even worse. the ones that we were experiencing, they walked out, and it led to, I'm trying to remember, it's a while ago, but I think it led to a lot of institutional changes with Lowell. I remember the faculty had to have a whole day to have conversations about race and what a microaggression is and how to avoid them. So I think some changes were made in that regard, and there are more conversations about race as my time went on at Lowell, which was a good thing.
Yes. Thank you. And maybe this is for Debbie and Denise. Could you talk about the pressures, particularly on Asian American teens? Are they getting an incorrect and incomplete message about success, or are elite colleges devaluing and being racist towards Asian Americans?
Yeah, there's a really powerful scene in the movie where the other physics teacher is laying out sort of the reality of, he's not a college counselor, but he's laying out the reality of sort of college admissions. And there's that sign that is basically, and by the way, you're Asian. And so you will be treated differently, even if you walk on water and do all these things. And I think that is that's a theme that we're seeing. There's lawsuits across the country from Asian students around to Harvard and Yale and whatnot around the way that they do their admissions. And I see all sides, right? If you look at sort of what colleges do and college admissions at these, particularly Ivy League schools or Stanford or whatnot, you're trying to build a class that's going to be really diverse and have lots and lots of different interests and identities. And I mean, Stanford wants to have equal number of male and female and someone from every state, and they want intellectual vitality, and they're looking for a bunch of things. And there's no possible way that 7 minutes reading an application is going to let you know all that you can know. I mean, look, Debbie spent a year and saw how wonderfully different and fabulous these kids were. And on paper, that doesn't always come through. And if it does come through, there might have been coaching. There might, then they're favoring people who write better. They're favoring people who, got a lot of coaching for the SAT or whatnot. So the colleges are in a real bind. And now more than ever, there's so many people applying to college. It's a good thing that the SAT and the ACT have been downplayed at many, many of these schools, test optional or test blind. I think that's fabulous because we know that there is implicit racism and inequity involved in standardized tests. However, it means more and more and more people are applying. When the movie was out, it was 100,000 people for UCLA. I think that was like 140,000 or something this year, something crazy, right? So how are you supposed to tell who should get in and who shouldn't? Who are the right people to make up this wonderful, diverse class? And Brown has the same issue. So there's not a really good way to do this. And they try for interviews. You saw what happened to Alvin, kind of got his hopes up because it was a 2-hour interview, even though his mom tried to kind of bribe the interviewer, So there was, it's a problem. Are colleges being racist? I don't think that they're being racist as much as they literally do not know how to differentiate all these different kids who now are applying with the very small resources they have of knowing kids, schools, regions, etc. I think there probably is some racism in some admissions, but I think more so it's just how do we solve this problem?
This is such a complicated question, and I think that there isn't an easy answer to it. There's certainly amongst Asian Americans the perception that there is that it's just harder. That it's just something that I was fascinated to understand more from a psychological vantage, really. What does it mean for a young Asian American coming of age when they feel like if they check the box to say who they are, it's going to be a count against them? That's just it's a terrible way to grow up. And to me, I feel like, what you see with the rise in anti-Asian hate crimes during the pandemic, and just this sort of exorcising of Asian American, anti-Asian American feelings in our culture, which, have been around and come and go in waves, consistently throughout our history here. It's really because we don't have stories like the one that I told, that there aren't narratives about an Asian American student where you can fill in the gaps and say, well, okay, I've got 7 minutes to look at their application and they've got this, and this. I don't have anything in my context, in my, that I'm bringing to it that can say how to differentiate the student from the next. And really it's a failing of not the college admissions probably as much as it is of our world, that we don't have a narrative that makes Asian American students three-dimensional today, really, which is, it's like, you need that for survival. In some ways, I feel like what is the count against a lot of immigrant Asian kids is more of the it's kind of not knowing, not having the same, it's like on the one hand, parents, it's like immigrant parents aren't familiar with the system and the way it works in the US, right? One of the big factors there is actually mentorship. Mm-hmm. So this was something that we constantly talked about behind the scenes, because we were also evaluating, like, do you think who is going to get in, because we're trying to film and decide which day to go after which student. And one thing that really came up a lot is that because of the myth of the model minority, that Asian Americans actually they're all great students and they succeed, and that there actually are very few resources for Asian American students, and they really, they're under-resourced. They don't have mentors. There's no one maybe saying, you don't have to take 5 APs and get, perfect scores on your SATs when you're a 7th grader, and do, 20 different, clubs. And really it's more about just finding out who you are. Whereas like we did feel like other students had that. And, that is one, I think there was a question in the chat about how to have systemic change. That's one thing. I think mentorship for students who need it. Another thing that, California, Washington, and other Western states, ethnic studies is mandated, but it's in high school, but it's not something that is really taken up at schools where they really need it, like in the high achieving schools, because it's like it will prevent, if you take ethnic studies in one grade, it will prevent you from taking this other class that you think will get you into MIT. I stood right next to the that MIT college officer that was there presenting. When it was over, the cameras weren't rolling. A mom went up and said, I just have a question. Is AP Physics C basically a prerequisite for MIT applications? Like, will they even consider your application if you don't have it? And he basically said no. And so, yeah.
So this is the time where I feel it's really important for the audience to know that the research is really clear that it is not about where you go to college that leads to success. And I think that's one of the main misconceptions we see particularly in immigrant community, who in other countries, it does decide maybe even the class, the caste system and the class that you're in, if you go here versus here. And in the United States, it's not like that. You can absolutely reinvent yourself at any time. You could go to a 2-year community college where you don't need even a GPA. You never need to take a test. You don't need a GPA. You walk in for free. The majority of the US states have free community colleges. And you want to go to the University of California? That's your ticket. Start out at these 2-year colleges, do well, and then transfer, right? So one of the ways we're trying to change society at Challenge Success is to educate and really myth bust around how important it is to go to college, because we can't control how colleges do admissions, and we can't control if they're being racist, but we can control and say it's not MIT or bust for anyone. And there are 4,000 universities out there, not 20. That keeps coming up in the film. There's 4,000 universities out there, and we write papers on this. We have white papers on the Challenge Success website. We do workshops on this to convince students and parents that it's not about where you go to school. That is not the equation for thriving in the United States. It's absolutely not. And that's a hard sell.
It's a hard sell. And it's also ironic that we're doing this with the Brown Club, but all of us have this Ivy League degree. But I have to totally agree in the making of the film. All of the students I met and they weren't, there's this narrow band of schools that they could go to that are considered the best schools. All of the kids at Lowell High School are incredible students. So if you look at the quality of education at the UC, say, UC, I think Merced, right, is one of the schools that's lower ranked, so it's easier to get into. But the quality of education and the quality of students that go there has really risen over this time period where there's so much competition. So I have had a friend who graduated from Harvard, became a professor of Asian American Studies at UMass Amherst, and said her thing was at her school, which was a really big school, you had the upper level students that were on the very same plane as like these, the 1% students that get into Harvard. And you have a whole they are there at UMass, but there's a range. So you also have more diversity. So it's really just a framework, I think, especially for parents. I think the kids, they get they learn a lot from their peers and from their parents. And, if they could figure it out on their own, it probably would be a different landscape. But it's you have to really change your perspective on what college is like today.
Thank you. And, there's a saying from my spiritual circles that the longest and most important journey any of us will make is from the mind to the heart. And happiness really does depend on the warmth of relationships. So I think that's important to mention as well. But what you're all talking about, college admissions, brings up this question of how we're seen by others and how we see ourselves, which is so complex. I think particularly painful for minorities and Asian Americans, certainly, because we don't have as many cultural mirrors in society. So how are we seen, and how do we see ourselves, and how do we find happiness? But speaking of admissions, I'll close out with this question to Debbie. Speaking of admissions, how did you admit your class to the documentary? How were there auditions? How did you select people?
Well, when we met Rachael, we knew we wanted to film her. She just had that presence, and I think you were. I've said this before to you in Q&As, but just this openness and sincerity that was so. Teenagers are complex beings, but we met a lot of our students through Mr. Shapiro, the physics teacher, and I have to give him a lot of credit. We wouldn't have been able to make the film without him. And he's a guy who's like, he created the AP Science program at Lowell High School. And as an aside, APs are the AP the AP machine, not the factory, but the machinery of it, which has a lot to do with funding of schools, of a school like Lowell, is one of the problems that could be solved. Having said that, Mr. Shapiro, who created the AP physics class at Lowell High School, had such a appreciation of art, and was a real believer in the arts. And in fact, he taught another AP class, which was called Seminar, was not a science class. And so through him, we met a lot of our students. We had a hard time, we could have made a whole series on so many kids. And there were so many that we couldn't include because they weren't, you have to find the connections in all the stories. There was a girl who was 11 when she came from China, and we filmed her in her senior year going and taking her citizenship test. And like, you never would have known that she had only been here for 5 years. There were so many kids that whose story we couldn't include. But I do think that I noticed another question in the chat about ethnic studies. It doesn't always include Asian American studies, and they're really, it's really necessary. It's a lot of the students, like if you're looking at Lowell High School specifically, where the majority of the students are Asian American, there really aren't. They're being asked on their college applications to write about who they are, and how can they know that when they aren't taught that? All of that history of being Asian in America is not in the history books. It's not being taught to them, and then what you're left with is just sort of like achievement and ranking. I mean, I really do feel like it's necessary to change the culture, to have more stories about Asian Americans, and we're kind of coming of age in a way, we that there is this sort of component about being an Asian American student in education that needs to be addressed to help alleviate a lot of pressure. Anyway, I know we're running out of time, so we'll have to bookmark that and continue that conversation. But,
well, thank you, Debbie. And boy, I'll say the past is always present. Our history is important, and our history catches up with us. So thank you for creating a document of our historical time, and for these kids' journey, and really for all young people at this stage of our journey on Earth. So Debbie, what is the future for this film? Where will it be playing?
Yeah, we're really excited. It was just announced recently that we will be released in movie theaters. Opening weekend is December 3rd. So put that date save that date and tell all your friends, because it's pretty rare for documentaries to get a theatrical release. So we're really excited. Greenwich Entertainment will be sending it out to major markets, and we really need support that opening weekend. And it's continuing to go through film festivals. So next month it's in Sundance, Asia, in Indonesia. It's going to be at the LA Asian American Film Festival and lots of other places. It's going to get to New York City in a festival too. Please check out our website, tryharderfilm.com, and you can sign up for our mailing list so that we can keep in touch with you. There's definitely people I see in the chat who I would love to connect with, so please reach out. And thank you so much for everyone for coming. And yeah, it's been a wonderful conversation.
Yes, thanks to all of you so much, and thanks to the audience. I wish we had many more hours to speak because I think there's a lot to think about and digest and explore from what you've shared and from what the film presented. So thanks to everyone, and yes, have a good night. I believe there's going to be a report inserted right now, but yes, thank you everyone, and have a good evening.
Thank you so much.
All right, great. Okay, so yes. All right. I guess I guess we're rolling. I don't know if there's an impact report that's going to be slotted in here, or that's what I have on my agenda. But
yeah, there's, if you go to the handouts of the chat, you'll see. I think you can download it. See?
Okay.
Yeah. And so yeah, it's just a little, we're, as we go through and share the film at festivals and it goes theatrically, we're really trying to promote mental health with students and have these deep conversations like we're having today. So that's, if you download our impact report, you'll find out more about it. And yeah, thank you again, Ravi, Denise, and Rachel, and everyone who joined us. So I think this is our time to say goodnight. And
thank you. Good night.
Thank
good night.
you.
Good night.
Good night.
Yes.
Thank you.
And please, I hope everyone puts us out of a job by talking about mental health. So, all right. Great. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.